Greetings. Our Frederick Riddle here from Christian News and Views. This is episode 14, and this is our day in which we look at the Bible, and with special emphasis on the King James. So up to now, we have been looking at the men who translated the King James Bible, plus the methods used by scribes in the days of the apostles in preserving the word from the original to a copy and another copy and so forth. We no longer have the original, but we do have faithful copies, error-free copies. We have also discussed how the Bible influenced the founding of our nation and made us a Christian nation. Today I want to look at the history of the English Bible. Prior to the 14th century, only a few portions of the Bible were translated into English. These were not available to the common man, but were owned by universities and monasteries. But then things began to change. In the 14th century, we run into the Wycliffe Bible. It took 10 months to produce one copy. Once it was translated and everything, it took 10 months to print that first copy. And probably the second copy took another 10 months, and so forth. The interesting thing was, there was no other copy around. No other English translation around. So for 145 years, this was the only English translation available. Then comes along Tyndale, William Tyndale. He is called the father of the English Bible. It was based on Erasmus's New Testament, the Latin Vulgate, and Luther's German translation. His reward for doing all this work and producing a faithful rendition of the Bible was he was burned alive at the stake. So that was then. The next thing, in 1535, the Coverdale Bible took place. This is largely a reproduction of Tyndale's Bible, so I won't spend any time there. In 1537, we have the Matthew's Bible. Now, this one was published then, 1537. His primary editor was John Rogers. Now, this is what they say about this. God himself spoke for the first time to the common people through the Matthew Bible. Why do I say that? Because any other Bible, the monasteries had them, and the universities had them, the higher-ups in the church had them, but not the common people. The common people didn't have a Bible. Now they got one. It was Matthew's Bible. And the first time, they began, crowds gathered around whenever the Matthew's Bible was being read. There weren't very many of them. So if somebody owned one and they started reading it, they would soon have a crowd around listening to them read the Bible. It was a day in which God spoke to them. It was almost like hearing his voice. Then came, in 1539, the Great Bible. And primarily this is because of its size. It was huge. But it was published in 1539. It was the editor was Richard Taverner, and this only lasted for 2 years. The Taverner Bible, because the Great Bible, like I said, it was already done, and they both came out in the same year. Now, getting back to the Great Bible, it was divided basically. The Old Testament was based on the Matthew's Bible. Remember we were talking about that earlier? The New Testament was based on the Tyndale Bible. And so he did his research, and he decided that the Matthew's Bible did a better job on the Old Testament, and the Tyndale's Bible did a better job on the New Testament. And so that's what came up with the Great Bible. And this lasted for a while, until 1560. So there's about 21 years here. In 1560, the Great Geneva Bible was published. It was edited by William Whittingham. get this, there were 160 editions between 1560 and 1644. That's an 84-year period, and they did 160. That almost seems like one every 2 years to me. Just a quick math there. Um, 160 editions. I don't know, but yeah, it was 84 years and it was 160. So I think I might be right. That's a lot of new editions, but they probably most likely in this day and age we do it as a common thing. We can go in and write a book, publish it, and we don't like it, we can go back and republish. We can change the thing here, do republish, change another thing here, change republish. Is with this print on demand. Well, his was not quite print on demand, but he had the time apparently, and he put them out. And he put out a lot of them, 160 of them. Now get this, this was a Bible that was used in people's homes. That's fantastic that they literally had a Bible that they could put in their home and sit down at their table and read. Probably I can picture the father with the Bible in his hand reading the Bible to his family. Maybe the wife was sitting here and the kids were down on the floor listening. I don't know how they did it, but that would make sense. But it was just something. It changed people's lives. It became part of their lives. Another thing is a group known as the Puritans. That became their Bible, the one they identified with. There were 40 printings from 1568 to 1606. So that's 32 years, 38 years altogether. 38 years, that's better than one per year. 40 printings. Then came along in 1609 the Reims Douay Bible, based on the Latin Vulgate. And now, it was never accepted outside of Catholic circles. As far as I know, the Catholic Church still uses that. And I've never... there is one thing about that. I think that's the one where when the word rapture is used, they actually have the Latin, if that's the Latin version, might be the Latin Vulgate that had it in. That was in the Latin Vulgate. Yeah, because Douay would be English. The Latin Vulgate is the only one that when it talks about the rapture, the word actually is translated there. See, in the English version, it's translated into God took them away, or gathered them forth and carried them away. Whereas in the Latin Vulgate, I think it actually says rapture or raptura, and so that's the only one where you have that. The English version, you have to actually translate it. In the King James Version, that came around just 2 years later, 1611. And you've heard a lot about it. A lot of negative stuff about this. Most of it is lies. I saw a study on this. A lot of times when these critics are pointing a finger at the King James, just remember they got 3 fingers pointing back at themselves. Over and over again, they would point at the King James and say, well, this is what it's doing. Well, when you look at their own Bibles, in which they're pushing, they do the same thing, but they don't admit it. It's got double standard, and that was interesting thing to discover, that they would manipulate things much like the liberal community manipulates facts and figures today. They did it back then too, but they just didn't have the kind of tools available that we have today. Now, there's a man by the name of John Reynolds. That's spelled Rainolds, Reynolds. He's asked King James to authorize a new Bible. And that's because, as you know, we already have other Bibles available to us. We had the Great Bible, the Matthew Bible, and the Geneva Bible. Now, and the Geneva Bible was identified with the Puritans. The Great Bible had another group that it was affiliated with, and the Matthew Bible still another. And so King James wanted to have a Bible that was be the best translation possible, and he wanted it to be something that he could go to the English people and say, this Bible is the Word of God. It's the one we can all agree upon. And so I've already gone through where the scholars were. I'm not going to redo that. But there were 54 of them. Many of them, if not all of them, were professionals. They knew how to do the job. They knew it. They spoke the language. They lived the language from teenage years and on up. Now, King James Bible became the book. It's not the one that the Pilgrims had when they came over, but it wasn't long before Americans started using the King James. Now, Russell Kirk said it was read from the American pulpits, preached with fire. It didn't matter whether you were a Baptist or a Methodist or some other denomination. They were men who were preaching from the American pulpits from the King James Bible. They were found in American homes. Like I said earlier about the homes in England. Now you can find them in homes in America. Maybe the home itself, that may be the most valuable thing they had in that home. Because they did value the Bible. And so they would gather around it, maybe around the fireplace or something like that, and hear the reading of the Bible. Again, it would have been the father. As the head of the home, that was his responsibility, still is. I'm not against, I'm against most of the things of the women's lib movement, but they have some things that are based on some good things, but they take it way to the extreme. Women are equals. They are not they are not servants. They are not slaves. But they are our equals, our mates. God created them to be a helpmate, and that's this way, not this way. So, but in the home, it was God made man the head of the home, and so they would preach, or not really preach. They would read the Word of God, and if they knew it and understood it, they might also discuss it, share with it. I can see, and I think I've actually read this happening. They would go to church and hear it preached from the pulpit. Then they go home, gather their Bible around them, and they would sit down and discuss what they heard the pastor preach. This would be particularly true of Baptist homes, because that is what we believe in. No pastor, no Baptist pastor ever feels threatened by his congregation having a Bible that they can check out what he's saying. If he's faithful to the Word of God, they're going to take it and they're going to look at that and they're going to take that his preaching and apply it to their lives. Powerful. Another thing that Russell Kirk said is it informed the intellect. The smart people, they would take the Bible and they would read it and learn from it. Affected the laws. When you already talked about how it impacted the Constitution. Well, ever since the Constitution, it impacted them. And to this day, it still has an impact. We have Christians who are in Congress. And they would make their voices heard. Unfortunately, they're not always listened to. But they do have a voice. And so now with the new government coming in, I imagine that voice is going to be heard again. It's going to be heard not only there, but from the big pulpit, and that is the presidency. We did not elect a pastor or a missionary. We elected a president. But the president can influence people. And he can influence the government to get out of the way, but he also can influence the people to look to God. And we need a revival in this country. And so we need a president, and we got one now, or coming soon. A president who can open the doors. He can step back and let God's people free to worship God as God has directed them in His Word, and to draw them up and put them to work in this nation to impact us with laws, regulations, and other areas where we need a Christian voice. Not only did it affect the laws, but it decreed the morals. The Bible has a lot of morals in it, not just the Ten Commandments, but a lot of morals in it. Things we shouldn't do. It has principles. In some cases, there are things that doesn't come out right and say you shouldn't plagiarize. Well, the word plagiarize is not going to be found in the Bible, but there's principles about it. Just can't think of anything right now in my mind, but there are different things that we have today that didn't have then. Temptations and other things that, for instance, well, how about vaping? That's something they didn't have back then. But there are biblical principles. You should look into it and see what the Bible has to say about taking in stuff into your body that might be harmful to it. Now, you don't want to get carried away, but you do want to get some principles that you can guide your life by. And I think you would make some changes if you did. The King James Bible has resulted in people getting saved. Now, they were still getting saved before the King James Bible came along. Don't get me wrong about that. But now they started getting saved in droves. Not only saved, but they were influenced. And they became influenced as they entered into politics. They became influenced as they got into industry. And they got influenced within their church, a church triumphant. Now I want to pause here a moment and tell you a little bit about myself. When I was a young man, I was a shy person. Actually, the better term that I think is I was an introvert. And you know what I did? I did not get close to people. So what I did to keep them from getting close to me getting close, I built a wall. This is before the immigration wall. This was a different wall. This was a wall that I built around myself, all the way from the feet right on up to the head. I called it a brick wall. And I had that wall built, and it was standing strong and it kept people away from me. It kept me from being influenced on a personal level by people. And as a result, I didn't have the best relationships with people. I didn't know how to handle people. I didn't know how to deal with people. But on May 9th, 1973, I believe it was around 9 o'clock at night. I have my reasons for that. We won't go into it. But I didn't write the time down, but I believe that's about the time. That's a Wednesday night. And that was a Wednesday night then. I went to church, and when I came home, I went and opened up my Bible to a particular verse, and then it dealt with something in my life, and that opened, Satan had been dealing with me on another issue, and it so clouded my mind, I never even focused on salvation. But when that thing was dealt with, boom, wow, my eyes went wide as I realized, and for the first time in my life, I realized I was lost and on my way to hell. That is not a good thing to go through, but it's a good thing to happen to you, because when you do that, you suddenly want to get saved. And so I fell down on my knees. I went down a sinner, condemned to hell, rose up. I was still a sinner, still had my sin nature, but now I was just dying for heaven. I had Jesus Christ as my Savior. Now, that took away that brick wall, brick by brick. I was 30 years old when that happened. I like to say that God took the next 30 years, taking brick after brick after brick after brick, pulling them down, until I'm now, I thought I was no longer a shy person. Last year, I asked people to describe me and how they knew me, whether it be business or whatever. And one friend said to me, well, I don't know much about your business, and I really haven't known you very long. But I think I do know one thing about you. You were a very shy person, or which may not use the word very. You were a shy person. That shocked me because I knew I wasn't anything like I was back when I got saved, but I still had elements of that shyness, and I may still have them. I've opened up more even since then because of that. And so we have a history with the Bible. And I want to recommend a book to you. First of all, I want you to recommend the Bible to you. If you don't have your own Bible, get one. And get a King James. Don't listen to all the negativity about it, because that negativity is built on misinformation. They'll tell you kids can't understand it. I go to a church where kids quote it. They understand it. They can read it. They can sing about it. I have stood and listened to kids talking about the Bible. I've heard them in church. I've heard them elsewhere. Kids all over the world, millions of kids, are reading the King James Version and understanding it. On a kid level, yes, but they're understanding it. And so, yes, they can understand it. You can understand it. You go to work every day, and you say you work. Well, I work for a resort, and it's a hotel, suites, and all that. There are terms we use there that you would not necessarily recognize, but I know them now. It's another language for me. Some people work for the post office. There's another language within the post office. Some people work in the mines. They have their own language. It's English, but they have terms that they have used that describe different situations and so forth, that outside of that little group or big group of people, no one else would recognize it. And if you heard it, you would say, "What? What'd you say?" If you can learn those, you can learn the Bible. And so when people say that you can't, and that there's no reason, that you need to look at some other English version, no, you don't. If you want to learn it, you will learn it. If you don't want to learn it, you won't. Simple as that. I learned the Bible. I didn't learn it at home. We didn't have a Bible time at home. We actually dropped out of church when I was a young kid. But when I got older, I bought it, and I didn't know anything about a King James version and other type of versions at that time. I just knew about one version, which at that time was the King James. And so I read it, and I learned it. And so you can too. But I would recommend also you get this book, just the history of the English Bible. I don't get a cent of money for advertising this, but Dr. Phil Stringer gets it. And he has a number of books out. I think he may even have a website. But you go to there. Let's see. No, it doesn't talk anything about a website, though. But you should be able to get it on Amazon or something of like that nature. And go in and get it. And if you can find it, buy it. It's not going to cost you much. It's just, what is it? 28 pages. 28 pages, but it is power-packed. And he's somebody who did the time. He took the time, the energy, and everything to do his research, to learn what the history of the English Bible, and well, especially, he's got other books down there about King James himself and about the King James Version Bible itself. So, and he also has books out there about I think it's called the Foundations, 2 books, one about the country and one about the world. But well worth your time of investing of any kind of money that it might take, and also investing your time. It is like I said, I don't get anything for telling you about it, but I just think it's valuable. His books are valuable. They're trustworthy. He put time into it that you might think you have put time into studying it. Whatever you put in, he's probably put in more. And he didn't. He wasn't swayed by all these arguments that the negatives put out. He went back and researched and went all the way back into history. And he can even, I think he even has one book out. I used to have it. I can't find it anymore. But it had the charts showing how the the history of the King James Bible dating all the way back to Ephesus uh, and other cities there in the Holy Land. Also, the other Bible versions, they all go back to Alexandria, Egypt, and he traces the history of, that's a chart. Beautiful work. It's well researched, and it's worth your time to find and get it. So if you can get hold of any of his books, you are on the brink of getting some good education. Well, that's it for today. Don't forget to subscribe down below. And as you can tell, my voice is getting better now. So whatever I had, I claim I had Charlotte crud, because the doctors don't have any name for it. They don't know what's going around. That was the same thing a few years ago, and that's the name people came up with. So I think it's back. But so it's great to be feeling better and not looking better, but feeling better, and getting my voice actually sounding better. So you have a great day. I will talk again to you. Tomorrow is, let's see, tomorrow is recap day. You have a great day, and I will talk to you then. See you in that episode.